Tonight's lecture, June 10th, 2016, is on Saturn square Neptune, Ill-Informed Decisions, by Christopher Robert Taylor.
Well, good evening, everybody. That would be everybody. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you. Once again, Leo, I need a little feedback. No? Okay. Christopher Robert Taylor, he's been a practicing astrologer for 12 years. He has a strong background in the hard sciences. He has a degree in meteorology, and he has a master's in atmospheric science and a master's in environmental science and management. He comes to astrology with a healthy dose of skepticism, which is appropriate for somebody with both the moon and his rising sign in Virgo. Yet, with his sun in Pisces, he relies on the creativity as well as the metaphysical sides of life for answers as well. He's made numerous television and radio appearances, has an active YouTube presence, and has been a speaker for the Sacramento chapter of NCGR. His website, everybody ready to take this down?
Yep.
Is sovereignharmony.com. Tonight he will talk about the Saturn-Neptune square, ill-informed decisions. Christopher will address the current Saturn-Neptune square, which everybody knows is in the sky. Saturn in the sign of Sag and Neptune in the sign of
Pisces.
Whoa, you are an astrological group, I see. Okay, so he's going to, regarding the climate change debate and the global decisions being agreed upon in order to contain it. Christopher Robert Taylor.
All right, thank you all for coming. We're going to get squeezed for time tonight. Unfortunately, we're all feeling Mars retrograde, right? Got to move our cars and all that.
It's not too late because we're getting started if you're part of the top level.
Okay, good. So, Saturn square Neptune. Is everybody familiar with the general energies of Neptune, general energies of Saturn? Neptune's very nebulous, undefined. Saturn's very rigid, defined, right? So what happens when they're having a fight? Which what a square aspect is. So we're all kind of feeling this right now, this idea that part of us wants to get something solid going. The other part of us knows there's so much more that we can't contain in that little bit of what we have to work with, right? Kind of like right now. I have a lot of slides, I might not get to them, right? So anyway, the 1 degree orb, this just means Saturn and Neptune are within 1 degree square. So the square is 90 degrees, so this would be 89 to 91 degrees. So in this current round, November 26th was the first exact square. And that 1 degree orb was from the 17th to the 4th of December. And we'll see, like he just introduced the idea of climate change and the regulations and whatnot, that there was a conference there during that exact same time period in Paris. Okay, we'll talk about that. This one we're in now, June 4th to July 5th, peaks this week on the 17th. And so we're in another round of really this tug of war, essentially, between Saturn and Neptune, the nebulous and the defined. And then the final one will be in September. And then following that, we'll see how, everyone's familiar with the moon's nodes, having to do with kind of past and future. We're going to see how both Saturn and Neptune are going to be aspecting the moon's nodes in the fall after that last aspect. So October, November, we'll see that at the very end. And what that sort of means for us. Anyway, so just putting on a wheel so we can kind of see we all the astrological minds to see the picture. So there's Saturn up there in Sagittarius, Neptune in Pisces. So again, concrete beliefs for the future. This is Saturn in Sagittarius. So this idea that I know what's true. How many people think they're going to walk out here tonight believing the exact same thing they walked in here? You won't. Trust me. Or I wouldn't be doing my job, right? Because the whole point of Saturn squaring Neptune in those signs, Neptune and Pisces, we're dissolving and making room for reconstruction. Saturn and Sagittarius are beliefs. That's what that is. So hopefully you get the Saturn Neptune square experience out of it. And that's what I'm hoping for. And not to make things more complicated, but there's Jupiter recently too with the North Node in Virgo opposing Neptune squaring Saturn, making this a little bit more difficult. And then last week we had, what, the new moon with Venus making a nice, what's called a grand cross. So all mutable signs, time for big changes. What's that?
The earthquake yesterday.
Yeah, and the earthquake last night, the worst one I ever felt. 15 years in California. So very, very awakening. So this is happening for everyone. This idea with this new moon, it's really about diversifying our potential to see ideas, right? And so it's really loosening up this rigidity with our beliefs. And it's helping us go forward in a more constructive fashion, all right? So what I'm going to do is go over not just this Saturn-Neptune square that we're going through now, but where it began, where the cycle actually started. So the cycles in astrology start with the conjunction, right? So the last time Saturn and Neptune were conjunct, up in the upper left, 1989, they were conjunct in Capricorn. Most of that year, okay? So what we're experiencing now is a reflection of what started in 1989. That was the birth and creation. 1998, 1999, they were squaring, kind of like now, but it was the waxing square. So there's a tension due to growth with what started in 1989. Then 2006, 2007, over here we have the peak, that's the opposition, the culmination, so it's kind of like planting the seeds, cultivating the fields, getting the harvest, right? And then here we are, right here, with Saturn, Neptune, 2015, 2016, and this is dissolving anything that's left over that prevents us from going forward. And so it's just like the moon's phases. The new moon is like the conjunction, the full moon is the opposition, right? We all know the moon phases, it's just that the time periods are much longer. It's just like a 37-year time period. So instead of being 28 days like the moon, we're dealing with 37 years of conjunction to opposition back to conjunction. And we can do this with our natal charts. I do this all the time with clients. If I have a client, they have Saturn opposite their Venus, I'm going to say, let's go back 14 years. In other words, when Saturn was on their Venus, what was going on? Probably got divorced, probably got something. And there's something going on now that reflects that. Do that with Jupiter, do that with Pluto, do that with any planet you have, and you're going to find this works really well. It's really simple too. We're not doing complex techniques. We're just finding out when the conjunction was, when the square was, when the opposition was. That's it. Real simple. So in this current timeline, again, Saturn, Neptune in general is the structured story. Saturn being the structure, Neptune being that story that we're telling, right? So when we structure the story, we're taking the pieces of it that we want to be part of the truth and delivering that, okay? And so with the conjunction in Capricorn up top, it gives a little bit of a flavor about what this round was about. So what you see in that list right there is just telling you the dates of when the conjunction was, the semi-square, which is halfway in between the square and the conjunction, and then halfway in between the square and the opposition, again and again. So we're going so it's basically 8th harmonic is what it's called. So it's 8 sections of the chart every 45 degrees, and showing how this issue, climate change, progressed from its birth in 1989 to where it is now and where it might be headed. And it's really interesting when you go through this. So my background, just to reiterate, I won't go too much into it, but yeah. My background in the late 90s, I was going to college for meteorology, graduated with that, went to grad school in atmospheric science, focused on greenhouse gases and climate change, went to Santa Barbara for a master's thesis focusing again on greenhouse gases and reducing greenhouse gases and policies to reduce greenhouse gases. I completely bought into the idea of climate change and carbon being the source, right? You'll see that my Saturn and Sag has changed as we go on. But anyway, this is my chart, just to give you a little intro to me. I was born during a lunar eclipse in Virgo, right at moonrise sunset. So pretty intense aspects, I guess. So there's a sun over in Pisces. I also have Mars in Pisces opposing Saturn in Virgo. So there's huge Virgo Pisces axis going. And so the rulers of Mercury, or the rulers of Virgo is Mercury, the ruler of Pisces, at least I like the more modern ruler, Neptune. Those are my only fire energies. So that Virgo Pisces energy, which can be really shy, right? Virgo Pisces both can be pretty shy. This gives me a little fiery outlet, and that's actually what's called a tridecile aspect, 108 degrees, exactly. Almost to a T, but within 2/60ths of a degree. So there is some outlet for that, which is kind of what you're seeing right now. And there's Saturn and Neptune for me right now. Neptune right on my Mars, Saturn squaring it, and of course, Neptune is opposing my Saturn, and I'm going through my Saturn square. So my Saturn returned 8 years ago. Now I'm doing the waxing square. So that's just giving you a sense of what I'm going through right now. Also, if you notice the north node in there, last Saturday was my nodal return, once every 19 years. You get that. It's still a 1 degree war, still going on. So lots of intense things going on. And then of course Jupiter is igniting that north node later this month. It'll finish off that cross my ascendant, opposed with the sun, good times. And my progressed chart, my moon, my solar arc moon just moved into Scorpio 2 months ago. That'd be there for 30 years. And this, my solar arc or progressed sun will move into Taurus later this year for about 30 years. So some pretty big shifts in that regard. And tonight, Sun Venus crossing my midheaven right now.
Right.
Right now. And of course, you know what that is. So there's a little bit of being on center stage right now. So with this whole cycle of Neptune, Saturn, like I said, I want to take us through the conjunction, through the squares, opposition, the whole cycle. I want to show you the last cycle real quick. The one before the one we're in now, so you can see how it works. Okay? So the last one started in 1952. It ended in 1989. So this recent one started in 1989. This is going to be really interesting to see the transition, how we go from one to the other. So just real quick, it's 52, 53 for the conjunction in Libra. So we're talking about a structured story about global relations. A structured story about what structured story was being put out there about global relations in the early 50s. Anyone can think of it? Cold War, exactly. And so what we're going to see is a progression of that. So about 10 years later, we had an issue. Anyone remember an issue that happened in 1962, 63 dealing with the Cold War?
Cuban Missile Crisis.
You guys are nice. And this was just before Kennedy got shot, yeah. But it was a Cuban Missile Crisis that fell right into this. Yeah. We'll see the exact time in just a second. And in 71, 72, it was the culmination. What was going on?
End of Vietnam.
Just before Watergate, there was
Perestroika.
End of the Vietnam War.
We were, but it was what was beginning of the end of the Vietnam. We'll see. And then 79, 80, what was going on then? That was a little issue with the whole being in foreign lands.
Oh, yeah.
Think Iran. Think hostage crisis. Okay. So this is it. This is what I think. The America and the Cold War. This is the last cycle. It's a structured story about global relations. Okay. So here's the beginning of it. There's Elsa. How cold was the war, really? Right. That's kind of the whole point of that picture. You don't have to read all that, and I'm not going to read all that. But the idea being that my slides will be available. You can sign up on my list here, and I can email you the slides. But what happened in 1953, in March of 53, Stalin died. So right in the middle of this. Stalin was a threat for there to be a Cold War. He developed a bomb in the late 40s, etc. When he died, pretty much, whoever, this Khrushchev, I can't even pronounce his name, he took over. Things got more peaceful in the next few years. And there was a lot of treaties and things going on. They were moving troops. It was basically the Cold War could have been over, but they had to keep it going for whatever reason. Right? And so the structured story was born. Then you get to the early 60s, and here's the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? And Saturn was in Aquarius, so now we can see this strained relationship, right? This strained friendship. Aquarian being like a friendship sign, Saturn and Aquarius. We've got to kind of figure out something there. Neptune was in Scorpio. And so Neptune and Scorpio, we're talking about this possible annihilation. This question mark, like, could we all be annihilated? Is this possible? Could this really happen? And that's the general energy of Neptune and Scorpio. Is not knowing, and Scorpio being that sort of death and rebirth. Then it's the Easter Offensive specifically, is what I was talking about in Vietnam. This was the culmination. This essentially was when North Vietnam took over the war and it was done afterwards. They surged in, and it was basically like people with Saturn and Gemini, there started to be a lot of dissension amongst people's opinions about why we're there. Was it really a point to be there? We were in a foreign land, Neptune and Sagittarius. Is there a reason to be in this foreign land? Is this a good idea? And this started to reveal that we really had no business there, and we weren't even making any progress anyway. And even if North Vietnam won, what difference would it make, right? All it did was kill a bunch of people. Then in the late 70s, early 80s, I was born in March of 79, so I was 6 months old when we started. But there was the hostage crisis, which essentially started in November of 79. This is when essentially we're going to help the Shah of Iran with some medical problems. And Iranian students said that's bullshit, and we're going to take some people hostage. And so that's what started it. And really April to July was kind of, April was when we tried to go in there and get them. Didn't work. July, the Shah died. And notice the end of the period, July 1980. So the whole person that this was involved was gone. Then we get to the end of the cycle and the beginning of the new one. This is the really, really interesting transition to me because Margaret Thatcher was bitterly opposed to taking down the Berlin Wall. She said, hell no, keep it up, we want it up. The day before the Berlin Wall went down November 9th, 1989, the day before, November 8th, she made this announcement to the UN General Assembly, right there. While the conventional political dangers, the threat of global annihilation, the fact of regional war appear to be receding, we have all recently become aware of another insidious danger. It is the prospect of irretrievable damage to the atmosphere, the oceans, and the earth itself. All of a sudden, someone who didn't care about the environment, a day before the Berlin Wall comes down, says, no, we need another reason for people to be afraid. And so we have this structured story, Saturn conjunct Neptune in Capricorn. So what's Capricorn? It's kind of global rules, right? Global elite ruling, telling you what is and what isn't. And so this was born in 1989. Berlin Wall represented the end of the Cold War. We gotta get a new fear of global annihilation. And that's what this was. And so why would you do that? This is the never-ending story. A great quote, one of my favorite quotes from Gomorrah, that crazy wolf that was chasing a train. This is my favorite movie when I was a kid. And so why, did we need a new threat for potential global calamity? Yeah, because people who have no hopes are easy to control, and whoever has to control has the power. And so there's always a sense of trying to take hope away. And what's Neptune have to do with it? I mean, it's that unlimited hope. And when you contract that with Saturn, you're essentially saying, no, this is what you have to do. This is what's going on. So that's the last round. Is anyone completely unfamiliar with climate science at all? I know it's hard for me because I've been involved with it for 20 years. So it's like the basics to me, it's like hard for me to understand. But is anyone completely clueless? It's okay. What? I just want to, so the basics are.
We're all experts, yeah.
Okay.
But you are.
Essentially, what? Yeah. Go ahead.
What's the thing with chemtrails?
We're going to talk about that.
Okay, because they're everywhere.
We're going to talk about that. I took pictures of them today and I put them up. We're going to see.
It's a beautiful day.
It was.
Chemtrails.
Okay. Anyone not know what chemtrails are? Does anyone not know what that is? It's supposedly contrails that actually they'll disappear behind airplanes within a minute, but when they linger and spread, that's what's called a chemtrail. I'm not going to get into the microphysics of what they're made of and any of those arguments. From an atmospheric perspective, I'm going to talk about it because it does matter for climate change, right? If we're throwing artificial clouds in the sky, it certainly matters. And so that's why we're going to talk about it. So what we're supposed to believe about global warming, climate change, is that what we have observed in the last, especially 25 years since the early 90s, right after this announcement that we were in trouble from Margaret Thatcher, big coincidence, we started seeing temperature fluctuations, precipitation fluctuations, et cetera, that were out of whack. And of course everyone said, oh, that's global warming, that's climate change. Remember that story that we created? That's what that is. And so generally we're supposed to believe the temperatures are warming, that's true. This is true science, I'm not denying the science. The temperatures are warming, precipitation is getting more variable, these are true things. We're supposed to believe that this is caused by a buildup of carbon dioxide, which is the waste, it's not the waste, it's actually the product of combustion. If you take a carbon source, fossil fuel, whatever it is, oil, gas, whatever it is, you burn it, it's going to release CO2 and energy. That energy is what we use to propel the car or to heat the home. And the waste, what comes out of that is CO2. CO2 is harmless, completely harmless. It's what plants breathe. So it's not a pollutant. There are pollutants that come from combustion, but that's not one of them. So what we're supposed to believe, though, is that, and it's true, there's science behind it, CO2, the more CO2, the more potential to absorb radiation and keep it warm, right? That's true. It's not untrue. What they're trying to make us believe is that it's the only thing, or the primary thing, or the only thing to worry about. And on the next slide, I'll show you a couple graphs here. The IPCC is the International Governmental Panel on Climate Change. They're considered the Capricornian, basically, authority. Let's put it that way. And whatever they say goes. And their science is different than the science that people had before they came here, as far as what the potential was for greenhouse gases to actually warm things. Okay? And so we're in trouble, according to the IPCC. And the only way to alleviate this is to decrease CO2, which is basically either make things more efficient so that we can go further on less fuel, or reduce it altogether. And so the common belief too is that alternative energy doesn't exist. And we're going to talk about free energy too if you're not familiar. And that doesn't exist, it'll take too long to convert. So we've got to tax you, we've got to put a tax on carbon. And that's what we'll talk about here too, is what is happening in these last few months. So here's a general, if anyone seen Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore? Okay. It's filled with a lot of misinformation. As someone with I watched it and went, what? Huh? Just knowing what I learned in school versus what I saw on.
He flunked his science classes, Al Gore?
I'm sure he did, because it was a very politically oriented video. But anyway, so when you look past the last 400,000 years, the top of the air, yes, temperature, the red line, and CO2, the blue line, do tend to correlate. Okay, so the story is as CO2 goes up, temperature goes up. But the reality is, if you look on the bottom, and you just look at 150,000, so 100,000, so a 50-year thousand swath, that's kind of just a little section of that. What do you notice about the yellow line versus the blue line? Which comes first as far as the left? Blue line comes first. What's that? That's temperature. In other words, temperature rises, then CO2 rises. So CO2 historically hasn't caused temperature changes. Temperature changes have caused CO2 rises. That's what that would say. That's common sense. This is something. It was an 800-year lag, actually. That's what it is. And they know this, and they still. And Al Gore will say, "Oh, but that's nothing. CO2 still does," and it's true because CO2 will. But there are limits. Here's a nice little picture of climate change debate. One's bundled up, one's summer. So essentially, when it comes to greenhouse, we need the greenhouse effect for the Earth to survive. It's a natural thing. You need some greenhouse gases, and water vapor is primary. So the amount of water vapor is like 90%. CO2 covers about 4 to 8%, so a very small chunk. And so variations in CO2 don't make as big a contribution as variations from water vapor. This is where chemtrails come in. Because this is a water vapor situation. We're adding water vapor condensation into the atmosphere. So we are influencing much higher in that sense. And so this is a nice little study conclusion that basically the predictions from the IPCC are based on poor data. The inputs, garbage in, garbage out, there's no inputs there for water vapor. They don't even care about water. All they care about is CO2. So can you see the Neptunian aspect here, the Neptune and Pisces, especially now, that's deception, exactly. It's very deceptive. And with Saturn in Sagittarius, we're talking about deceiving us about what's true, and about what we can do next about what's true. This is awesome because I didn't see this coming. It's just a few weeks ago in May, just last month, and I was like, perfect timing, because there was CERN. Is anyone familiar with the Hadron Collider? We're paying billions of dollars in tax money to test out how the universe started by like shooting molecules at paper walls and whatever. It's pretty crazy how much money we're spending on this to find nothing. But one of the things we found is how clouds form and how essentially what they're finding is the Earth is less sensitive to greenhouse gases than previously thought. Put it that way. So what we're being told for the last 25 years about how severe greenhouse gas emissions are for changing temperature and whatnot, we're finding out from actual experimentation it's not true. Okay, this is just a few weeks ago. And this is why I think we're in this now. We're in the Saturn square Neptune. So the information's starting to leak out, like, the story's breaking down. Kind of like the Cold War story broke down, right? We all saw that break down. You have a question?
No, I just said whistleblowers.
What's that? That's it. And so just in general, there's a lot of abuse in science and policy. I've been involved in it my whole life. There's a great quote, and I swear I can't figure who the original person was. There are lies, damn lies, and statistics. And the point is, you can Mark Twain is one of the people I've seen that people have used it. The point is, science can never be settled, which is what Al Gore says in truth. The science is settled. If you know anything about science is an iterative process that never ends. It's always new information, new changes, change what you thought you believed based on what you see. That's what science is. You can't settle it. There's no such thing. Politics settles on decisions, but science can never be settled. And so you can take the same statistics and give them to two intelligent people. They can argue to the same point. That's why you can do this with climate change too. You can argue the same point and both have a winning argument or an intelligent, rational argument with the same numbers, but have an opposite result. It happens a lot in medicine. It's usually where the money is, right? Especially like pharmaceutical companies. It's just about, if you get the right funding, you can get the right study to say the right thing to get your thing pushed through. Same thing with climate change. Remember, there are limits to how much CO2 can actually hold There's an 800-year lag between temperature and CO2, so it can't be CO2 causing temperature in general. Not that CO2 doesn't cause some temperature, but the degree is far less. There's been a lot of suppression and confiscation of energy technologies, like Tesla, Nikola Tesla. If you're not familiar, there's a lot of other people in the 1950s, like Wilhelm Reich was another one that got a lot of this stuff confiscated. Right now, we'll see there's a huge movement with energy technology as far as free energy goes. It sounds outrageous, but remember that we're supposed to believe that the universe is a closed system, but we're finding out as it isn't. In other words, there's tappable energy around. Different topic anyway. But there's lots of money to be made in carbon trading and carbon taxes. That's why you can see the politicians in this Saturn, Neptune, Capricorn that started in '89 trying to find ways to make money off of this problem, right? And this is great. Hal Lewis was the University of California, I think Davis or Berkeley. He basically resigned, and he wrote a letter, a resignation letter. He said it is the greatest and most successful pseudo-scientific fraud I have seen in my long life as a physicist, talking about climate change. He resigned because of it. And there's also another study here that said the rate of, this is about science in general. When it comes to scientific findings, we tend to think, oh, science says so, it must be true, right? They must have been rigorous about it. They must have, if this is what the conclusion is, it must be true. If you go back, the rate of findings that have later been found to be wrong or exaggerated have been found to be 30%. And this is general scientific studies. And when you take away the randomness, it's 5 out of 6. So in other words, most science is wrong. It isn't science. It's just opinions with money to fund the opinions. This is what was referred to as chemtrails. If you see this in the sky, especially the X's and whatnot, and look, I could do an 8-week seminar on chemtrails. There's too much to talk about. The idea is, though, there's a bunch of high cirrus clouds in the atmosphere created by humans, and that has an effect on the weather. How can it not? How can it not have an effect on temperature? If you said greenhouse gases, what high clouds tend to do, and we'll talk about that in a second, is they tend to hold in heat. Low clouds keep it cooler, high clouds keep it warmer. So this can be a source of warming. So if you're measuring warming, that can be a source. Now, intuitively, most people think more clouds must be cooler. And that's why a lot of people get confused. If you look into chemtrails, there's a lot of people that think we're getting sprayed for population control, and we're doing all this. I don't buy into, like, I just look at it's stuff in the sky, it has an effect. It can't be neglected. That's all I see. Okay?
Were there accusations that artificial chemicals were being put in the exhaust?
Of course. Oh,
That's not proven.
I'm not going to comment on that.
Okay.
But it could be true. I wouldn't put it past them. But anyway, so there's other possible explanations too. Like that's one of them. Another is the entire solar system right now is kind of warming. There's a lot of evidence that all the planets in the solar system are warming. The electromagnetic frequency of the sun is strengthening, and so the other planets respond to that, and that can have effects. So that's something. How much? Hard to measure. There's other greenhouse gas sources from man, like fracking. You're familiar with fracking recently? So fracking is just basically trying to get methane from it's like almost like when you're finished with your drink and you have a straw and you're trying to get those last drops. It's getting the last drops of carbon from sources that are empty. And it's a lot of energy intensiveness, a lot of pollution involved in it. It affects groundwater, etc. It also emits a whole lot of methane, and methane is a stronger greenhouse gas than CO2.
Climate change in cows.
Well, there you go. There's some methane from cows too. But that is taken into account. Okay? That is taken into account in the model. So they do account for cows, but they don't account for fracking. They don't account. Like the models that are pumping out this energy don't account for this. This is huge. That's the biggest, in my opinion. Absolute biggest. So man-made, why would we want to modify the weather? And this is huge. I mean, you don't want to go down this rabbit hole, I'm telling you right now. The worst thing you can do right now is go home and Google weather control or weather modification. Worst thing, because I spent 2 years engulfed in it. And I couldn't get enough of it because I couldn't believe how much was out there. Because it's not hidden. It's just not put in the media. So you can find it. It's not, no one's hiding it from you. So in 1996, very interesting, the Department of Homeland Security published Owning the Weather by 2025, which, by the way, is the end of this Saturn-Neptune cycle, 2025, in the next Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Interesting enough. So for whatever reason, they had a sense that this would be a great time to own the weather. Rutgers University climatologist claims that his department in New Jersey was hired by the CIA to control other nations' climates. They've been testing this stuff like crazy since World War II. This is not new, but in the 90s it went. Once they announced that the climate was going to change because of carbon, they started testing big time. They started going, all right, now we have a reason, we can blame the changes in weather on something, so let's just do this. My opinions don't. That's, timing seems to line up. There's also, when I was in college in the late 90s, when I was looking for what I might be able to do for work in meteorology, there was what was called weather derivatives. Has anyone heard of weather derivatives? Probably not. Okay, it's trading commodities on weather. It's crazy. It's like selling insurance policies, right? This is more than real. It was brand new then. It was born out of this idea that, whoa, we can make money off of people. Like, so if you have a company that relies heavily on climate, like a farm or a ski resort or something, they can sell you derivatives that basically hedge your bet. So like, we have a climate forecast for this winter or this spring or whatever it is. And if you don't get this amount of rainfall, or this amount of snow, or the temperature this much warmer than whatever, then we'll pay you out. So just pay us this much now, and we'll cover you if you need it. And then, but knowing that there's a possibility to basically adjust the weather, it is cheaper to adjust the weather. You can take money from someone now and invest in making sure you don't have to pay them out, right? And then what happens, right? You have both sides of it, right? There's also people that would say that chemtrails or this what is for blocking the light for ascension. Like if we're talking about ascension, people, ascending, shift. I don't know about that, but there are people that believe that, okay? Also, some people think it's protecting us. They think that, the government knows the globe's warming so fast, we've got to spray the skies and cool it down. Now, there are plans to do that, but I don't think they've started it, especially because you wouldn't spray the upper atmosphere with white clouds if you wanted to cool it, right? So they wouldn't be doing it. Jim Lee, if you go to climateviewer.com, there's your rabbit hole if you really want an organized look. He's done so much work. He's a Scorpio out in South Carolina. He's about my age. He's really computer savvy. He's put together all kinds of information about the timeline, going back to the early 1900s of when weather started to get modified. Okay, and all the technology, all the policies that have been passed that allow for weather modification. That you wouldn't believe it because you don't hear any of it in the media, but all of it is out there. Our Congress people know about these things because they sign them into law. They don't tell us about it, and this is true. Okay. So there's a lot of reasons. The Department of Homeland Security, though, is, in my opinion, probably the primary reason why we're seeing it. They're trying to figure out how to wage warfare with weather. Because if you can take out somebody's crop supply by cutting off their rainfall, that's better than invading them, right? It's cleaner. There was a study published in 2004. I talked to David Travis myself through email. So I found this study, and what they did was, if you remember, after 9/11, there were 3 days with no airplanes in the sky. What a wonderful, wonderful research opportunity. So I forget what, it was a public agency, federal agency, that said it was the University of Wisconsin, they said, hey, can you do a study, just wanted to study this 3-day period compared to like the last 30, 40 years, or whatever, the same period. The beauty about mid-September is that it's a generally calm, stable period across the entire US. It's like one of the least stormiest time periods, almost year to year. You get very little temperature variation, so it's like you can compare the last 30 years of September 12th to 15th and get pretty much steady information. So what they wanted to find out was, is there any significant effect in temperature? And actually before we get to that, and so what I read it, and all it did was it provided this information about what's called DTR. That's daily temperature range. So what that is, if the high temperature is 80, the low temperature is 60, the DTR is 20. Okay, real simple. And I said, and all it did was it said, here's the change in DTR. And I'm like, who cares about DTR? What were the temperatures? Was it the highs or the lows that were affected? Like, that's more important to me. So I emailed him, I said, why would you leave it out? He said, we didn't. We submitted it with it. But they told us they would only report the DTR. And I said, why? And he said, they weren't very clear. And I said, do you have the data? And he said, yeah, so we sent it to him. And then I looked at it and I was like, that's what you would expect. Because again, theoretically, if you remove these high-level cirrus clouds from the sky, the nighttime should get cooler because it was holding in heat. Right? And so you'd expect DTR, say high of 80, low of 60, you expect that 60 to go down and DTR to go up. That's what they found. DTR went up. But it wasn't clear as to whether it was warming because of the high temperature going up or was because of the low temperature going down. It could have been either one, but they weren't clear. And so it makes, when you first read it, you think, oh wow, the clouds are cooling it. Because DTR went up, in other words, it got warmer, right? You assume it's warm just by reading it. DTR went up without the clouds. Up. It got warmer, which means clouds are cooling it. Which means it would be okay to spray the skies to help with global warming. Right? The layperson would say, well, that makes sense. That makes sense, but it doesn't. Here's another one. This is there's all kinds of conferences and crazy stuff that goes on like every few months on weather modification. Here's one with the aviation and climate change conference, whatever. And what they said was contrail cirrus contributes to a large fraction to the aviation-induced climate impact. Where is this in the climate models? They know what's happening, right? So again, Neptune and Pisces.
Are those chemtrails? The chemtrails?
They're referring to them as contrails, yeah. But that's what they mean. Because no one wants to say chemtrail because then you sound like it's a conspiracy theorist, right? Oh, you're a chemie. You know, they really put a bad name on that. And it's true because they've gone all crazy with the whole Agenda 21 and trying to kill us all kind of thing. So don't get into that. Right? You know. Satellite data analysis suggests observable impact on aviation, cirrus cover, radiation fluxes. In other words, they're admitting a significant impact. Okay? Anyone have any questions about that? I know it's a lot to swallow and it's unastrological, but it's information you didn't know. And that's Neptune in Pisces and expansion. And it's Saturn in Sagittarius, a little bit of shifting in what you believe. Yeah.
Are those contrails and whatever in the sky? Because I have a new car. One thing I'm noticing, because I do a lot of airport pickups, is every time it rains or spits on my car, it's white. It's leaving the white drops, which I cannot see.
There's a lot of people.
And I'm like,
say the
are
same
we
thing.
breathing this crap?
Well, what is up there has to come down with the water, right?
Yes.
And you also have to know that getting into atmospheric physics, it gets really complicated, but there's no such thing as water just falling from the sky. It has to condense onto a piece of something. It's the only way it can fall. It has to be a certain size to fall. What silver iodide, which is the traditional cloud seeding chemical, what that does is it helps raindrops grow bigger than they would, so they fall faster. It's supposed to produce rain. What aluminum does, which is what's suspected in this chemtrail, is it creates smaller droplets which are less likely to fall. In other words, preventing rainfall. And when it finally does rain, it comes down with what? Aluminum. And aluminum is the antithesis to magnesium in the body, and Alzheimer's, and you got it. Same with ADHD, all that good stuff. It's all related to aluminum. But I'm not going to go there. Rabbit.
Do these people who are doing this sort of thing, do they have another planet that they're going to?
What?
Or do they live there?
You have to understand, like, there's been military people that have come forward. Like, an industrial hygienist came forward talking about the chemicals that because she had to, like, study and report on these chemicals they're using. She'd be like, what is this for? What are we doing? When she found out what they were doing, she quit. And she went ballistic talking about it. And then there's been pilots that have been asked, so what do they tell you when you're flying these routes? And they're like, well, they said it's a matter of national security. They just fly the route. And they just do their job.
I wasn't clear. Did you ever get clarification on the 3 days after 9/11?
Yeah, sorry. Thanks for bringing that up. So what it was a significant increase in DTR without the clouds that was almost all associated with low temperature decreases. So in other words, it was proof that having the cirrus clouds in the sky was keeping it warmer.
But it got cooler.
And it got cooler at night when we removed it. Very significantly too, not like a little bit. Like something that would warrant more studies, but instead they took out the temperature data. They said, this is DTR, so we did the study, it's over, we know what it means. No one else has to know what it means. We're going to put it over here. You see? So, how are we doing on time?
Yeah, 15 minutes till break.
15 minutes before the break, but we're doing good on time. I think I sped it up a little bit because I was paranoid. Am I going too fast? It's a lot of information.
Yeah, a little too fast.
It's Mercury and Aries. We'll slow it
So
down.
retrograde Mars.
Yeah.
Fine.
I just have one question,
Yeah.
because you've done all this research and so forth and so on. Back in the 60s, we were terrified because it was going to get cold.
Thank you. And I have that on a slide up here.
Oh,
Yep. Very, very good observation. This is true. I wasn't alive, but when I was in college in the late 90s, my professors, when they were in college in the 60s, were talking about how it was all about global cooling. And like now it's called lunar. So there was a little bit more like freshness with it in the mid to late 90s when I was in college.
Just curious, you mentioned the 1952 cycle was
Yep.
a whole for, and the 1989 cycle was climate change. Can you correlate the particular story that is being thrust upon us with the sign of the inception conjunction of the planets? So that, in other words, when 2025 is Neptune's around, we have another convention and like a conjunction, and another story will start. Do we have an idea of what that story might be?
It's on the slides.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
I love it though, because now I know that I'm providing the information you want to hear. So, any last questions before we move into the current cycle? Now that we have a little brief on climate change, a little brief on the stuff we didn't know about climate change, and a little bit on how the Cold War unfolded. Do we want to go through this? Okay. So, similar to what we saw before, we saw this slide with just, again, I'm going to go deeper with this than I did the Cold War. I just did the 4. I just did conjunction, square, opposition, square. Here I'm going to do in between the squares, in between the square and the opposition. So that's the semi-square, sesquiquadrates, if you're not familiar. And those are all the symbols up there. So again, February of 1989 to November of 1989. I'm also going to tell you where I was on my journey in the meteorology realm. It's funny how my life correlated with this quite a bit. It's very interesting. It's almost like I was the person to be able to do this, because who has the astrology and the meteorology who's going to have this blend? Like, this is like crazy. No one else is going to see this, right? So anyway, Margaret Thatcher, November 8th, 1989, speech to the General Assembly. We're in trouble. Tomorrow the Berlin Wall is going to fall, so we need a new story. Here's the new story, right? Literally tomorrow. It was the next day the Berlin Wall fell. Al Gore actually gave his first speech on climate change in 1989. Big surprise. All the powers that be, Capricorn, were presenting this idea. And Margaret Thatcher was a right-winger. Al Gore at least was a left-winger. So, I'm not playing sides here, but left wing is obviously the more environmental wing. She didn't care one lick about the environmentalists. All of a sudden, it matters, right? And what was also funny is that through the UN, it was suggested that we were at a 10-year tipping point. This is 1989. That if we don't turn around by the end of the 20th century, which is like the late 90s, we're in trouble. Big catastrophe. Does everyone remember the catastrophe that we went through in the late 90s with climate change? Is it too much to remember? We all blocked it out? No, it didn't happen. That's the idea. But in the early 90s, right after this announcement, this is when the weather started shifting. I remember it because I was a weather geek, okay? And I loved the weather.
The sea level's supposed to rise 10 feet or something?
The beach is still where the beach is, isn't it? But I was in Massachusetts, where it snows a lot. But it didn't, I'll tell you, it snowed all through the 80s into the early 90s. It snowed in the winter, but not like cataclysmic. It snowed, you shoveled it, you moved it. It was a pain in the ass. Once the early 90s hit, snow became crazy. You weren't getting a foot, you were getting 3 feet. And it was happening often. When I was growing up, all I heard about was the blizzard of 78. This was my parents. Oh, the blizzard, this was a year before I was born. Blizzard of 78, the biggest storm ever. Anyone from the East Coast? Remember the blizzard of 78? Okay. This was like the biggest storm ever, and nothing will ever match the blizzard of 78, and blah, 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 blah. All you heard is blizzard 78, this and that. I thought, wow, I missed the biggest storm ever. I'm never going to see the big storm. I saw, before I moved to California in 2001, in just like an 8-year period, I saw 4 or 5 storms greater than 78. Okay? Literally, more snow, more like, it was just, and people still, it was funny, the cognitive dissonance in there. People still thought, oh, blizzard 78 was worse. Oh, and you look at the numbers, it's like, no, this was worse. Blizzard 78, it's like number 5 now. It was number 6, now it's like number 5. This is by the late 90s. There's been more storms since then. Last year, they had the biggest snowstorm ever in my hometown. They got like 34 inches or something. Broke another record. So literally 8 of the 11 greatest single snowfalls in my hometown have occurred since 1992. So only 3 from 1850 to 1992, from when the records are started. So in 140 years, 3 are on that list. In the last 25 years, 8. Something's changing. So this is why climate change is happening. But what's causing it? Who's messing with the weather, right? How did it suddenly go nuts right when it was announced it was going to go nuts? This is a suspicion.
How did it know?
Has anyone heard of HAARP? H-A-A-R-P? Anyone? It's ionosphere heating.
Angels don't play it.
Yeah, there you go. It's not the thing angels play. It's basically, there's all kinds of speculation about what it does. But it's basically a technology that can heat the ionosphere, which is way up above even where clouds are. Okay? And there's a lot of people that, if you go to Jim Lee's, the climate viewer site that I told you about, he can show you, he explains exactly how HAARP and chemtrails are used together. Think of like chemtrails as like, almost like fingerprint dusting. So you're throwing up some dust, and you're using this HAARP system to kind of see where you're pulsing, and you can kind of move, you can warm where you want the atmosphere to warm, to prevent convection, to steer storms, to increase, decrease precipitation, those kind of things. It's weather control. It's craziness. It's outrageous, and it's happening, but they'll deny it to the end of the day. But in the early 90s too, HAARP came on, this is not hidden, it came on board in the early 90s. Also, people started seeing the chemtrails in the sky in the early 90s. And that's when the weather started going down. So we can deny that it's happening, but it is happening. And I, in October of 88 to February of 89, leading up to this period, I was in 4th grade, and 4 of us in my class, we were the gifted ones, whatever. We got to go to a different school every Friday and learn about an advanced topic, and the advanced topic was meteorology. So this was my experience of Saturn conjunct Neptune, which is something I would eventually major in during the Saturn square to Neptune when I was in college. Okay? But anyway, you can see how that works. In 1994, I was in high school, and this is when we had the semi-square. This was the very first framework convention on climate change, March of '94. The very first formal gathering that says we're going to talk about this. It's not just an idea from Margaret Thatcher or Al Gore. We're going to talk about it. And there was an extensive study at Colorado State University from '89, right at the start of their conjunction, to 1997, on cloud seeding. Okay, they're studying it, so they're messing with the weather. How else can you study it if you don't mess with the weather, right? And like I said, I was in high school, and I actually decided during that time period that I was going to major in meteorology. See, there's how do you do tests on the weather and not affect the weather? That right there is a classic like chemtrail photo. Like some days the skies look like that, and you might not even notice. Notice how you feel too, like up in here on those days. This is not natural. Look at this. There's like concentric circles that way, concentric circles that way. This is a signature of HAARP, where it's like a central pulse. And it's like, how would that happen in nature? How can you have like two? It would be uniform if it was just air movement, right? So you have 2 pulses essentially. There's 2 center pulses happening at the same time. What are they doing? We have to speculate what they're doing exactly, but they're doing something with the sky, right? I took those photos today. That's at 11:55, and then 10 minutes later, didn't zoom in. That's how big it got in 10 minutes. That's what happens. And today was relatively clear. You can see like in the back, there's not much, but it was just one I saw. I was taking a walk, and I was like, ooh, perfect.
Places on the planet where they're not doing chemtrails?
Yes.
Where?
I know, I've read this. Like, this place, I think like you go to like South America, it isn't really happening all that much at all, because they're not doing the programs. But Europe, Australia, the US, you betcha. Big time.
Last year, probably in early April, we were in Paris, and we must have had over 20 chemtrails.
Yep.
It was like, and my husband was really into this, and there was a book, and it was like, oh my God, I've never seen so many.
And X's and all that. Yep.
And people were crossing.
And then by the late afternoon, all you see is this like hazy, milky sky, like it's just nasty. Anyway, but those are real-time pictures today that I just randomly took. JFK on weather control, 1961. We shall propose a further cooperative efforts between all nations in weather prediction and eventually weather control.
Very good.
Right? So there was intention to do this. World War II, they played with it. In the 60s, they decided we're doing it. Yeah. And then here's that publication in August of '96. Weather is a force multiplier owning the weather in 2025. That's the Department of Homeland Security. Dig into that, you'd be like, what? Really? What are they doing? Yeah. So this is, and again, 2025, the end of this Saturn Neptune cycle. So this brings us to the square. Saturn in Taurus squaring Neptune in Aquarius. I was in college, okay? Publications are coming out all over the place regarding climate predictions. They're coming true, even though Margaret Thatcher 10 years ago said we'd be in a catastrophe. That didn't come true, but they were claiming that things are coming true. So this is the birth of weather derivatives in the weather risk market, which we just talked about. So craziness. In 1999, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, ever heard of it? Okay. They first introduced exchange weather traded futures. Energy companies and other companies with bottom lines significantly affected by weather had a mechanism for trading derivatives in order to hedge against losses due to unexpected weather events. So think of this. This is like Saturn and Taurus. It's a monetized structure for nebulous futures, Neptune and Aquarius. The idea that we don't know what might happen, but we're going to monetize it. And you can see the growth of weather derivatives, 2001, 2006. In 2006, we're approaching the opposition now between Saturn and Neptune. So it's kind of like this culmination.
Who's on the other side of the derivatives that's taking the money?
All those companies there. I've anticipated every question here tonight. You're going to watch out.
It's in a slide.
Yeah, I've anticipated everything you're going to ask. So those are some of them.
Of the continents, you said South America, of the continents other than South America, those that are having most of the chemtrails, are they experiencing most of the odd weather? For example, everybody's telling us that Antarctica is melting. So do we have chemtrails over Antarctica?
No, and actually Antarctica is growing.
It is growing.
Yes.
Oh,
It's the North Pole that has had, relatively ice-free summers and stuff like that. But
Greenland is melting.
Yeah, but South Pole is growing. The ice cap.
Pole is not growing, or is
It's fluctuating
It's fluctuating.
and generally shrinking.
So where exactly, because of the chemtrails, all the different continents, we have 7 of them,
Well,
where are...
You have to remember how we measure weather data. It's at weather stations. How many weather stations are in Antarctica? How many weather stations are in, you see? It's where the weather stations are. That's where, again, part of why the data in the computer models is bogus. And it's based on not everything. It's based on some things. Part of the Neptune and Pisces, right? Not the whole story.
Do we have very many weather stations?
Do we have?
Do we have very many weather stations? Like, for instance, in the really cold areas?
Like in the Arctic? No, and stuff like that, not really. No. And it's all, I don't know if anyone remember in 2009 there was what was called ClimateGate.
So they were falsifying.
They found a bunch of, kind of like the Hillary thing right now with the emails. They found a bunch of emails from scientists talking about how to alter data to make it fit the narrative. And so the right wing was all excited, like, yes, we got them, right? And of course it kind of boiled over, it just got swept under the rug, people forgot about it. But yeah, here's a nice little look at the weather derivatives market. You can't really see that, but 99 it started. By the time we got to 2009, it was really building. This is huge. The weather derivative market is really big, and the fact that you can control the results, it's sort of like insider trading, right? In May of 2003, this was the Sesqui quadrant just before the culmination. There were a lot of papers published on global warming just that month. This is when the private sector pledged to reduce CO2, and there was a threat to sue the EPA. You'll see that in the opposition, in the culmination, Massachusetts versus the EPA. This was, if you're not familiar, the Clean Air Act has certain pollutants that are regulated. CO2 is not one of them because it's not a pollutant. And what they did was they ended up suing the EPA to regulate CO2 as a pollutant under the Clean Air Act, even though they didn't ever put CO2 under the list of what's a pollutant. It's not a pollutant, it's just regulated as a pollutant under the Clean Air Act. So they gave it a mechanism to be regulated without calling it what it is. And this is, I was actually in the middle of a master's degree on climate one. And so, do we want to take a break? Is it, how many minutes we got?
This would probably be a pretty good time to break if you're in a natural spot for it.
I'll take it because we'll talk about the culmination, kind of where this all led to when we get back. So what we did was we talked about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn in 1989, how it's progressed, and now this is the opposition in August of 2006 to July 2007. An Inconvenient Truth came out a couple months before this started, so in the time frame. like I think May or June of 2006. This was the culmination. The idea was born in 1989. It finally came out to the public in a more documentary-style manner, where most of the public got to see it. They started hiring people to go around doing presentations, right? Doing the Al Gore presentation to talk about this with people and companies and what we need to do. And it's a very fear-mongering kind of documentary that I bought into. In 2006, when I watched it, I was like, I'm glad I'm doing what I'm doing. I was working in environmental planning and green building. I still work in that, but for different reasons. I work in it now because sovereign harmony, the idea of self-sustainability, that kind of thing, not just necessarily to reduce carbon. I want to use different technologies. Anyway, so this documentary was released. Look at this picture of the Weather Channel. I didn't make that picture. That's coming off. Look at the chemtrails in that picture. That's sick. Because that's basically indoctrination. That's what the sky looks like. We're the Weather Channel. We know what the sky looks like. And this is what we say the sky looks like. And if you look in movies, TV, almost always now there's chemtrails in the background of the sky. It's crazy. Once you start seeing it, you can't believe what you see. But anyway, the Weather Channel, just after this period, in 2008, so it was in the works of happening, it was bought by an NBC affiliate. So it used to be Ted Turner, he owned it. It was kind of independent. It was very calm. I was a Weather Channel geek. They used to make fun of me in college because I'd be in my room watching the Weather Channel. Everyone else is partying. And like, I'll come out in a second. I'm watching about this hurricane, or I'm watching, something going on. But it was a very tame, very down-to-earth kind of people in it. 2008, all of a sudden it shifted. They fired a bunch of people. You can read articles about this online. It's a bunch of angry people that got fired from the Weather Channel for no reason. Basically people that probably weren't going to be good for the new style. Yeah. And so they kept like Jim Cantori, who's like this super like crazy on crack weather nut when he goes out and does storm coverage and whatnot. They kept people that would keep people hyped up in fear, right? And now when they do like hurricane things, like, they used to be honest about storms. They go out in the storms, and if it wasn't as strong as it was expected, they'd be telling you. In 2005, 2006, Hurricane Katrina, it was still authentic when Hurricane Katrina was going on. And all of a sudden, every storm became the epic storm of the century. You can't turn on the Weather Channel without hearing about the epic storm of the century, or the millennial storm, or this or that, or Snowmageddon, or whatever else. It's craziness how much it changed. Why? Because NBC bought the thing. What does NBC want us to know about things? Who owns NBC? Who really? Is anyone familiar? This is a little off topic, we'll come back. Anyone familiar with the Council on Foreign Relations? And how they own all of the media? Okay. If you hear it in the media, it's partial truth. It's not that it's not true, it's just that it's not much true. There's Neptune, and there's what you're getting. Right? Yes, that's what this is revealing. So there's a lot of inaccuracies in that film that I noticed. It was kind of like, well, maybe I'm wrong. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Well, question myself. When I first saw it, I was like 27. When I saw it, now I'm 37. So, I was a little bit more naive. This is when the results of Massachusetts versus the EPA came out in 2007. This again said, here's the Clean Air Act, which regulates pollutants. Here's CO2, which is not a pollutant. But we're going to somehow find a way to regulate CO2 as a pollutant under the Clean Air Act. And they won. They can't add it to the list because it's not a pollutant. It really isn't. It doesn't do anything. It's just what plants eat. Whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So they can't be a pollutant, but they can actually regulate it as a pollutant, which is insane when you think about it. I could see regulating it on its own, even though I don't agree with it, but I can't see regulating it as a pollutant. I disagree with that. This was also in Nairobi in 2006. The UN climate talks that were held, and it resulted in one of the first general consensus among world leaders about global warming, about what they're going to do about carbon reductions, etc. So it was all about the beginning phases of the idea of carbon restrictions, global carbon restrictions, okay? Taxing, whatever you want to call it. Also, phase one of the carbon trading allocation started in 2007. So in addition to weather derivatives as a way to make money, now we have carbon trading. This is where if you are going to emit less carbon, you can I'm not even 100% sure how it works, but basically you can make money by how much carbon. It incentivizes you to reduce your carbon, and you can make more money. And if you have to pay for more carbon that you emit. That's it. So you come out a winner if you emit less carbon. That's how it works. So if you get into it, you're incentivized to reduce your carbon, which is an okay thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but again, it's a monetized structure that we don't necessarily need. In California, the Global Warming Solutions Act came out in 2006 during this time. That 2020 sounded like a long time at that point. It was 14 years later. Now it's only 4 years ago. But at that time, they decided they had a plan to reduce overall emissions in the state by 2020 to a certain level. doubt we're getting anywhere near where they were able to get. Yeah, and that was what they said I would work with the environmental plan. Then in 2010, 2011, this is the seismic quadrant after the opposition. So we're heading now on the other side of this rung, getting close to where we're at in the present day. The IPCC suggested that weather extremes that we're experiencing are likely due to climate change with a high degree of confidence in more future events. Very vague, but not, assuming it's carbon-based climate change, right? And this is when I was starting to wake up. This is when I was starting to find the snow out. Was at that time, around 2011 to 2012. This is when I kind of woke up. And yeah, there's been a lot of, look at this map here, observed changes in heavy precipitation events. And how that's defined, I'm not sure what that means by percentage or whatever, but it's raining a lot more when it rains, that's what that says, in general. When it rains a lot more. And that's true, but what's causing that? Logically speaking, now that I know about this weather control stuff, what makes more sense? CO2, which can potentially increase the temperature, which can potentially increase the moisture, is possibly leading to more rainfall, or direct modification of weather is leading to more rainfall. In other words, an action intended to change the weather is changing the weather. Which one makes more sense? B. Yeah, B makes a lot more sense. But most people don't know about it. This is really interesting. Anyone remember Hurricane Sandy 2012? This is a rabbit hole you don't want to go down.
Did that take out the Atlantic City boardwalk?
This was the one, yes. This was in October 2012, a very late hurricane. They don't usually happen that late, right before the re-election of Obama. Remember this? And so Obama came out looking like the hero instead of Mitt Romney, because he went, it's craziness. Okay. Those orange lines are typical, those are actual storm tracks of hurricanes. Okay. When hurricanes go up the East Coast, very hard for them to ride the coast. Usually they go off. Very hard because rotational physics, right? So hurricane's spinning like this. And in order to get the hurricane to go due north, you have to get a due west push from the upper atmosphere. That'll send it through. If you get the typical weather pattern in the northeast in the fall, it's going to be slightly north of west. In other words, like a northwest like this. So what is that going to do? It's going to send it to a right angle that way, along the coast and off. That's typically what happens. That's what you see there. Typical. Once in a while, you might get this kind of southwest, which will poke it and make the hurricane go in. Right? But it's very hard to sustain that over a long period of time. In no time in history has there been a pulse to make it do this, which is what Sandy did. That's insanity. Right there, that red line, that's insanity. That path makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, it even went southwest when it got up to Pennsylvania. That never happens. You know what you need to make it? You need a southeast pulse to make that happen. Where the whole flow in the northern hemisphere is west to east. How are you going to get the southeast pulse? It doesn't even make any sense. So right here, you'd see toward the south. This is like off the Carolina coast. Right here, you can kind of see that outline. Look at all the chemtrails in that satellite photo.
Well, isn't one of the indicators for El Nino the winds moving in opposite direction?
That's a different part of the. That's in the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
We're in the Atlantic.
But you were just talking about the directions of the winds. That's a scenario.
El Nino in the eastern Pacific, yes, which would be kind of where we are now. But off the East Coast, there's no effect. It doesn't linger. But you can see all the trails in that photo. And there was actually eyewitness accounts of how trail heavy the skies were in the southeast, because the storm was going to hit the southeast. But there's strategies from an atmospheric thermodynamic perspective of where you spray to create the right steering, right? And then HARP can also be used in that sense. So if they're spraying to give this HARP pulse or whatever it is, an ability that you can imagine they probably had an artificial pulse that gave it the right angle to go inward. My guess, this is speculation, is that was a test to see how well we can control storm. That's my opinion. To see, in what happened here, 3 days before this hit, it was down in typical in the Caribbean, and the original forecasts were all to go off the coast. And then all of a sudden, the next day, boom, this is gonna hit New York. And it was like, what? Since when is 72 hours out possible? This is the Weather Channel, owned by NBC now, in 2012. Big emergency, and they were all sure this was gonna happen. This never happens. Usually it's, you gotta watch it. They started preparing. They already knew it was gonna go. It's gonna hook in. They all knew, somehow. Who is telling me? I don't know. But there's no way that happens in nature. And so I think this was a test. And the timing of it just before, like a week before the next election of Obama, is very suspect too. It had a very late hurricane, it's not typical. And also note, and this is something you can look up yourself, in 1997, there was a drill in New Jersey, New York, in that area, called a Hurricane Sandy drill. Yeah. So this is 15 years before it actually happened. A similar scenario, and it was like a practice drill of what would happen. And then they actually created it.
Wow.
Craziness. I'm not saying they created the storm, I'm saying they steered it and made it do what they want. I don't think we can create weather, I just think we have the technology to modify. And this was a great indicator of how strong we can be. That's insane, in my opinion.
And what were the exact aspects of Saturn and Neptune at that time?
In 2012,
Sandy?
it was, well, let's see, so in August 2011, so a year before that, they were in the Sesame Quadrant.
Okay.
So it's kind of in between the Sesame Quadrant and where we're at now. So I think we have to look at other aspects to see what's going on there. But I think this is just kind of lingering. It's just the progression within the Saturn-Neptune cycle.
Yeah.
Just kind of seeing it happen. But anyway, pretty insane stuff. Now we're here. This is where we are. So this started in November. It goes through September. Again, it's Saturn in Sagittarius, Neptune in Pisces within it. It's the waning square. The first exact square was November 17th to December 4th. And the COP21 Paris Climate Conference, November 30th to December 8th. So about 4 days before the exact square ended, it started, and it lingered about 4 days after. So, but it overlapped with the exact Saturn Neptune square. Okay? So, and this is a conference. So we already saw back in 2007 or 2006, we had the first kind of consensus of global leaders. This was the first legally binding global climate deal to reduce carbon emissions, greenhouse gases. So now we're getting serious. Now we're making decisions. Here we go. This is the title of the talk, ill-informed decisions. We're about to make Saturn and Sagittarius decisions for the future, hard and fast, and we're not including all the information. We got this nebulous Neptune and Pisces thing. The exact square right now is June 4th to July 5th. Just this week, a whole bunch of mayors from different cities went to this low-carbon summit in Paris. And what's interesting about both of them, if you read what's up here in yellow, these leaders are burning hundreds of gallons of fuel and flying thousands of miles to discuss how to reduce the amount of fuel the rest of us can do. They can webinar, they can Skype, they can do all kinds of stuff. They can be if this really is an issue, they'd be examples of what we can do to reduce it. They wouldn't be jumping in planes, spending our tax money, and going and discussing, oh, here's what we're going to do to our vineyards.
If they really do use carbon dioxide, that's going to create a problem of it being colder, because the carbon dioxide is helping in the atmosphere, protecting us, but it's keeping the warm in.
It is, yeah, it's a natural protector to a degree, and it can, like I said, it can cause temperature increases. The whole idea is that we're being told that it's at catastrophic levels. We've got to pull it down to levels that aren't catastrophic.
You can increase the plant growth and more CO2.
But really, we can deal with this. And the most recent studies are showing that we can easily alleviate carbon in the
So
atmosphere.
what is the non-catastrophic levels? We don't know.
It depends on, according to the IPCC or according to, it depends on who you're according to, right? According to the IPCC, we're already at catastrophic levels, and we're just waiting for the shoe to fall, which they'll just create a shoe that falls. And so exact square that's coming up to end this would be late August, late September. September 10th is the actual last date that this will happen. And again, like I said, we'll talk about it. The North Node is going to be involved. North and South nodes are involved with Saturn and Neptune just after this, so in October, November. So there's sort of like it ends, and then there's repercussions of where we're headed right after. And so at this point, I'm challenging to speak about the information. So this is speculation, obviously, what the semi-square is going to be in 2021, and what the next conjunction in 2025 and 2026 is going to be. That will be in Aries. Next conjunction in Aries. I have some theories that will go on. But maybe in 2021 we have the first implementation of carbon tax policies on a widespread scale. They try to actually implement it. It'll take several years to actually get the paperwork and everything else. And I think just like the Cold War died in 1989 at the birth of this new cycle, this idea is going to die in 2025, 2026. And it's going to be part of, in my opinion, with Aries as a conjunction, the emergence of individuality or sovereign sustainability, free energy, the idea that you don't need to go get energy from carbon anymore, so why would you? So it kind of solves a problem and starts a whole new system, a whole new Saturn, Neptune structured story that we are independent, we don't need outside sources. We can create the new structured story, you see? That's what I think can happen. So I think it'll be the breakdown of what we're learning there. Again, owning the weather by 2025, this is the military operation, brings us right to the end of 2025, 2026. Or maybe Saturn, Neptune, Aries rules military. Maybe they got the weather, and now they own it, and so they're successful. I don't know. But yeah, I think positive. I think it can be us that creates the new narrative. We don't need, because remember that the previous one was in Capricorn. The one before that was in Libra. It's all like outside of us. Aries is us. It's just that pulse of self, that pulse of I am energy. In my opinion, all environmental degradation is just a symptom of externalized power. So whether it's big government, big corporations, whatever you're giving your power out to something outside of you, that's what's going to cause those problems. When things are self-sustaining and inside out, like individuals in small communities that interact with other communities, there is no division. There is no degradation. It doesn't happen. It only happens when you're going outside. Like in the example of the energy industry, it's like we're relying on someone else to grab all this energy for us, create a system for us to get it. Like the energy grids right now are ridiculous. There's 3 grids in the U.S. There's the East, the West, and Texas. Literally, that's it. That's it. And why don't we have microgrids? Why don't we have like a San Diego County grid or something like that, where we feed it our own sources of energy and we distribute it the way we want to distribute it? Why do we all have to be stuck on this one grid? That's a very externalized power system for governments, and that's what causes pollution. Also, like I said, this could be getting out of the idea of truth being shown to us, like telling us what is. We're telling ourselves what is true, right? We're structuring the story. This is Saturn, Neptune, and Aries. We have the potential with this energy to make that happen. We don't have to give it to the military who wants to own it in 2025. We can create it. Free energy technologies, if you're not familiar with any actual real ones. Quantum Power Inc. in Seattle. They created this technology. It's basically a self-sustaining battery, essentially. It self-charges itself. It uses the oscillation of molecules, that vibration, that energy, that motion, to generate itself. So once it gets going, it just keeps going. You don't have to charge it. Right? And so they're scaling this. They're currently in research to scale this to all operations, like your cell phone. Now you're just putting a battery in there that just self-sustains. Put a battery in your car. It's an electric car that you don't have to charge. That's bad.
How long does that battery last?
They probably haven't tested it for enough decades to find out. Right? That's the idea. Tewari. Anyone heard of Tewari in India? Okay. So there's an article from just back in October. Anyone heard of BRICS?
Yeah.
B-R-I-C. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. 5 countries uniting to not only create a new monetary system for the world, but also new energy forms, new energy sources. So they're basically going up against the IMF, going up against the Federal Reserve, going up against big oil, and these countries, which is a huge chunk of population, China, India, that's all you need right there. Plus we got Russia, and we got Brazil, and we got South Africa, and there's a whole bunch of other countries that aren't even in those top 5 that are following suit. When it comes to currencies, they're going to be pumping up other currencies and whatnot. So the petrodollar, the US dollar that we all rely the entire economy on, they're looking to crash. But not to destroy us, not that we're not included, but the idea is to crash that system because we're enslaved to it too. And there'll be other options is the idea. But anyway, they like Tewari. Tewari has an energy generator similar, it's a perpetual energy generator. The alliance has in the past promised to release all suppressive elements. So once we can push this forth, which this could be in the 2025, 2026, this could be when this happens. A new structured story that we're independent, we don't need energy from outside of us. We have no more carbon issue because there's no more output from burning carbon, right? The Kish Foundation, he's a guy from Iran, similar kind of story. He's got all kinds of books that you can read and whatnot. And the Searle Energy Generator John Searle lives in San Diego. And I've met one of his primary researchers, Jason Gabelli. I've actually met him in person a couple of times. In fact, I saw him on YouTube. I saw a YouTube of this guy, Jason Gabelli, talking about the Searle energy generator, talk about, serendipity, coincidence. I'm in a controversial bookstore right down here. And I look over and I recognize him from a YouTube video. And I was like, hey, did you do that YouTube video on cavitation, which is this idea of bubbles that, essentially it's generating energy from like natural collapse of bubbles. And he was so excited that he recognized it. He was just like, what? You saw that? And I was like, yeah, I saw it. And he's like, what? That's all. He was just so happy. You can tell he's not used to getting seen. And so, he gave me his card, this and that, and then I ended up seeing him last summer there in Orange County. Him and a few other people did a mini conference called the Free Energy Talks of Now. And so it's all these talks about what's up and coming in free energy and what's actually here, what we can actually do, what's being suppressed. And again, Tesla had all this stuff going on before. Just last week or 2 weeks ago, I should have put this up here, a 13-year-old kid created a mini free energy system. Anyone see that? It's a YouTube video. Google like 13-year-old free energy, whatever. You'll find a YouTube. This kid's like, this is all I did. I just put this here and that here. And then, of course, everyone's like, oh, that's cute. He's so smart. And then my thing is, this doesn't prove that he's smart. This proves how easy it is. It proves how easy it is to make free energy. Because all he did was like read a couple books and go, oh, I can do that. That's all he did. It was simple. And that could be scaled up and down. And so again, John Searle's working on this great, one of the side effects of these generators, which is a good thing, it's a positive thing, is it creates negative ions, which actually helps you heal. So if you put it next to your bed, essentially this thing can charge your home, and you'll actually be, it's like antioxidants essentially. It's like preventing inflammation. It's like basically this all tool for this. Yeah. Think about it. This could kill the energy industry and the health industry, the health insurance industry. All of it. Yeah. So you wonder why they're suppressed. Right? You wonder why they spray us with toxic clouds so that we don't think, but we're. So yeah, these are just pictures. Like that's the Reed cell from the company in Seattle, Quantum Power. This is the Searle energy generator. This is Tawari's patent in India, and then that's the Case Foundation in Iran.
The generator is the same principle as the pyramid, huh?
Yeah. That's a good point. So she's talking about the pyramids, and there's a lot of theories that the pyramids were designed just like Tesla towers, if you're familiar with those. So the pyramids were doing this perpetual energy generation. The Tesla towers were just a takeoff from that, and now we're rediscovering it only in the internet age. So things are harder to suppress. That's the difference. So Tesla had it in the modern times, but the Egyptians had this potentially. I mean, it makes more sense. In fact, they can't. There's no real conclusion that like the Great Pyramid of Giza was actually a tomb, which most pyramids are assumed to be. They're probably, the way they're strategically aligned in the world, they're probably a network of energy balancing and whatnot. So anyway, Saturn and Sag, square Neptune and Pisces. It's where the structured stories that were birthed in 1989 are now facing challenges to remain intact. That story is kind of getting challenged right now. Too many people know what's going on. So any attempts to create concrete solutions, Saturn and Sag, are conflicting with the ability to see the whole truth of the situation. And so decisions are being forced on the world in the presence of incomplete information. And so that's what's happening. Like I said, the Paris conference was in November, December. That was the first exact square of this set that we're in. Now we just have this mayor conference in China. Again, a whole bunch of CO2 getting blasted just to get there. And who knows what comes up here in the fall. Because in the fall, the last one we'll see is in September 10th. But the node is involved. Remember, the North Node is in Virgo. It's near Jupiter. Jupiter hit the North Node in January. Okay, but it's finishing up. In fact, next week it'll be back into 1 degree warm, and for about a week. It's like the 17th to the 24th, I think. So the period from January to June, about a 6-month period, it's been Jupiter on the North Node. So we're talking about expanded kind of logic here. Expanded, I guess, data, right? It's kind of an expansion of what the data actually is, what the reality actually is. And then what we see, so for Saturn Neptune, this whole Saturn Neptune square, Saturn's going to square the nodes in Pisces where we go October 7th, but it's really the whole first half of the month. It's an orb, 1 degree orb. We're leading up to the election at this point, just by the way. But what is that going to be? That's like a split. It's kind of a split as far as what people believe, right? Saturn and Sag, and now you're splitting people. Some people want to believe the old story, and other people want to believe the real truth, the Virgo side. And so you're going to have people clinging to the old story. Some people saying, but no, we know this to be true. We have the data. Remember, just last month, that CERN, that Hadron Collider, basically proved that we were overestimating some things. So maybe that's going to start seeping in.
What?
That Hadron Collider, remember I said in May, just last month?
CERN.
Yeah, CERN, yeah. They did an experiment and they found out that that temperatures aren't going to be as responsive to CO2 as we originally thought. So it's fresh information. This is like 3 weeks old. Like perfect time. Maybe that seeps through here, and maybe I could see Donald Trump being like, I'm going to be the truther, and spoils the whole thing for everybody, which is a good thing. I love Donald Trump. I'm not going to vote for him. I think he's not a good person. But I love his role in waking everybody up and sucking the poison out of everything, bringing it to light. It's like, this is seriously what people think. Here's what he's saying. Listen to him. This is seriously what people think. You can't hide from that. It's like our shadow. It's our national shadow, right? He's exposing it all. He's just holding up. And if something like this came out, I guarantee he'd be like, oh, because he's a right wing. The right wing is a perfect, he loves to pump up his constituents. He's going to be like, we're going to stop this global warming nonsense. Look what I guarantee he's going to be the one. And it's going to cause all kinds of crap. It's going to be crazy. I love it. Yeah, wait. Can't wait. Because he's going to be the one to do it. And again, he's not, I mean, he's an idiot, but he's perfect for his role that he's playing. You look at it from a higher perspective, a spiritual perspective. He's playing wonderful and just pulling up all the dirt, giving us an opportunity to see it. And also, he's going to be someone, he's a punk that will do something like that. He'll just, the establishment says, no, this is what it is. And he'll say, no, here's what I think. He's like, you got it wrong. Yeah. You can see him doing that, like, those facial things he does, you know. I'll make it warm. I know about warm. This isn't warm. I'll tell you, I can turn up the warm.
Well, my best friends are warm.
Yeah, my best friend is warm.
Yeah. He's good. I know about warm.
And I have to tell you.
Nobody knows more about global warming than I do.
Yeah, I know global warming. I was there when it was cold. I remember when it was cold. I didn't like putting a blanket on anyway. I like it. But you know what? So Neptune jumps south node. It's the final step here. No, most of November. This includes the election. This includes the day of the election, I think, is what is it? Like probably the 8th or 9th or
2nd.
Second?
No, it's a week after. The 8th?
Oh.
What is it? The 8th? Something like that. It's going to be ish.
It's in there.
8-ish. But in other words, it's within this time frame. So Neptune will be in orb of the south node during the election. So what are we releasing at that point?
Past.
Yeah. We're releasing the past story. What is that story? And we're moving ahead. How can we do that with Hillary or Trump? Doesn't seem possible, does it? Something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. There's going to be another solution. I think there's going to be another candidate.
Donald Trump said there's no drought in California.
I know.
What? If you talk about weather modification, what can be done, or what you want to correct the drought, or who benefits from the drought?
It's anybody's guess, honestly. It's all speculation. I have no idea. But there's a lot of people that speculate that the ridge of high pressure that you need in California to create the drought, that has been artificially enforced or reinforced. So where HARP is located in Alaska, they're pulsing, so what they can do is strengthen the high pressure, which means all the storms go up and around it, right? So you can basically make a drought in California pretty easy. I think they're just experimenting with how to drought other countries by droughting us. But also think of what that does to food prices. And what does that do to people with weather derivatives that know that?
Well, the politicians want to control all the wells and the water too. They use the drought as an excuse.
There you go. There's all kinds of reasons to create a drought. I have no idea what exactly they are.
And if we really had a drought, why would they allow Nestle to sell our water? I mean, come on, that's ridiculous.
A lot of politics.
I know.
But anyway, any guesses on? So in terms of this discussion, Maybe we're releasing the old global warming story. Maybe in November there's something that's like, this is, now there's kind of a point of no return where we have to kind of go with the logic, go with the science, and science is telling us that maybe this is not true. Because there's a lot of science, I mean, anyone aware of like the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth?
Yes.
Yeah. Where do you hear about them in the mainstream media? Nowhere. But these are
YouTube.
Yeah, but these are real, hardcore, like professional scientists. They have opinions and they're not being heard. I think not only is this topic, I focused on global warming, but there's other topics that may come to light with this Saturn square Neptune. More 9/11 information, more vaccine information, more, these Zika viruses and these other pseudo viruses that are put up. Like, who knows what else the truth could come out here.
False flags.
False flags, yeah. So it's anybody's guess. But anyway, just to note, the United States of America. The chart here is a Sibley chart, if you're not familiar. Does anyone use a Sibley chart for the US? So with a Sibley chart, Sagittarius, it rises at 12 degrees. Okay? When 9/11 happened, Pluto, essentially what it did was it basically crossed the ascendant when W. Bush got elected. Then it kind of hovered within 1 degree orb for a while, and then in September of 2001, about a week and a half after 9/11, it finally pulled out a 1 degree orb of the ascendant. So Pluto was crossing that, leading up to 9/11, from late 2000 up to 9/11. Now we have Saturn there squaring Neptune. Saturn's at 12 degrees Sag. Neptune is down here. Let me show you. Neptune is down there in Pisces at 12 degrees. So this square right now, we're highlighting that. Neptune is square the ascendant, Saturn's on it. And this Saturn will finish up on October 10th. It will cross the ascendant for the final time. Again, just before the nodal contacts with Saturn and Neptune in October, November. And Neptune will be, again, squaring Saturn at that time. So what are we possibly uncovering about the U.S. in general, about the shift in the U.S.'s power in general that happened around 9/11, and that kind of thing, or shift in the image of the United States? What is the concrete information that might come out? It's interesting to know, because this Saturn-Neptune square is re-highlighting that Pluto crossing the ascendant from 9/11.
It says 10 o'clock instead of the final time.
Because it crossed it originally like a few months ago. It's just because it crossed it, it went retrograde. It's retrograde now. It's going to go direct and over again. So it's just kind of hovering over it right now. But the point is, it's finally done. And I'm comparing it to Pluto, which again hovered over the ascendant most of the late 2000, 2001, and it finally drifted beyond 1 degree orb just after that. And so now we have Saturn doing the same thing, but with Neptune squaring it. So we have two major planets making major aspect to this part of the chart that was highlighted for you. I don't know what that means. Your guess is as good as mine. But this fall looks really interesting. Right? We have the end of the Saturn-Neptune square, followed immediately by Saturn squaring the nodes in October, followed right after that by Neptune on the south node, and we have an election. What's going to happen? What's going to come out? What stories do we have to release because of what comes out? Right? It might be the story of what happened on 9/11. Who knows?
Maybe Hillary was part of that also.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Are there any forces that are active that cover it up?
They cover up.
Cover up what's about to be revealed.
I'm sure they're trying. But we're in a different age. We're in a different place. It's just so hard to cover information.
But it should be up there.
Lots of whistleblowers.
It's just we're in an information age. Anyway,
Neptune
and
keeps
there's the node too, by the way. That's going to be involved in this. It's perfect. So the nodes involved there too. So Saturn's going to be squaring the nodes, like we said, with Neptune opposing. Just who knows? But it's big. So if you're not confused or are unclear about the problems I presented here, or what the best approach to solving them are, then I did not convey the essence of Saturn and Sag squaring Neptune and Saturn. If you're not confused, you should be a little confused. You should feel a little overwhelmed with information. You should feel like you don't know what to think of it, what to make of it. That's the energy, right? That's what it is. So that means I did a good job. So there are things that we know that we know. There are things that we know that we don't know, and then there are things that we don't know that we don't know. And as long as we know that, we know we're still. There's always, again, this fall is going to be a surprise. I don't know what's happening, but just be prepared. I think October, November is going to be really interesting.
Rumsfeld came out with a statement similar to that too.
Did he?
Yeah.
What did he say?
I don't remember. About the same thing, only he said it in his own way. There are things we don't know, things we don't know, and all that stuff.
Maybe he did.
But didn't you say it was Twain that originally said it?
So that was their lies and lies.
Oh, lies.
And statistics, yeah.
Maybe that was Rumsfeld then.
SovereignHarmony.com if you're interested in the workshop I'm doing in August. Sign up if you want these slides. I can email them to you. If you want to be on the email list, let me know. Any questions?
No, but I want to compliment you on your tone and your set of, you didn't do an ain't it awful. You showed movement and described movement, and that there is always, I don't want to say so much hope, but anyway, sometimes you come through out of these lectures like, oh my God, this is particularly about things like this where the politics and the environment come in and all this, oh my God, we're all going to be screwed. But I don't get that. You don't, I just want to congratulate you on moving it in a very good
Thank you so much, Christopher.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Deborah asked earlier about Hurricane Sandy, so I went and looked it up. Neptune was at 0 degrees of Pisces and Saturn was at 1 degree of Scorpio. They're like working
So they're trying. So they were in a trine. So they were connected. There you go. They were connected. So there you go. So there's the momentum. There's the momentum of the water moving right into the East Coast.